Welcome back. You are watching Mark on Motoring, and this is my final instalment of my video coverage from the 2023 Classic Motor Show at the NEC in Birmingham. In this video we'll be taking a look at Citroen. There were various Citroens on display from a number of Citroen clubs, from the more conventional, if there is any such thing, through to some more one-off models. In the previous instalments we've already taken a look at Renault in part 1, Peugeot in part 2, and most recently Matra and Simca in part 3. If you haven't seen those already, feel free to take a look after you've watched this video, of course. I'm not really big into pre-war cars, but the one model that does interest me is the Citroen Traction Avant. The stand I'm on here at the moment is the Traction Owners Club, and joining me is Ian, who's going to tell us a little bit about these fantastic cars. So Ian, you've got quite a variety of tractions on the stand here.
Yep. The four of them are Paris built, French ones, and there's one Slough built English one here.
I was going to ask you about that because I know they say that you can tell by the chevrons on the grille.
The chevrons on the grille, yes. If the chevrons on the outside, they're French.
Yeah.
If the chevrons are on the inside of the grille, on the back of the vertical part, that's a Slough one.
Yeah.
Except they did change it a bit in 1939 for some reason to confuse people, probably.
Oh, right.
But generally, if they're on the front of the grille, they're French. If they're on the back of the grille, they're English.
Yeah. Now, obviously, these are a pre-war design, but they did continue
up until 1956.
Yeah.
Ostensibly exactly the same as it came out in 1934.
Yeah.
So the DS had already been out a year and a half before they stopped making the traction. So
right.
By 1957 they were a pretty ancient design.
Yeah.
But it worked, and they stayed ostensibly the same all those years.
Now they did actually offer a few different body styles, didn't they? In the tractions. This one to our right in particular is quite interesting. I noticed we've got, is that like a dicky seat on the back of there?
It's got a dicky seat, but it's a coupe, so it's a very rare car. They didn't make that many of them, and there's only 2 or 3 left in the world. So
yeah.
But it's a bit strange because the driver and the passenger are in the dry because it's a hard-top coupe.
Yeah.
But any other passengers in the back, they're out in the weather.
It's a very much an occasional seat, isn't it? It's
very much so. Yeah.
I think I have actually seen at Brooklands a convertible version as well.
There's a few. There's about 18 known convertibles in this country, Slough-built ones.
Okay.
And that's all. So they're pretty rare as well. Not quite as rare as, they call that a faux cabriolet.
Oh, right, okay.
For some reason.
I know obviously you've got a few saloon variants on the stand as well.
We have, yeah.
Again, even the saloons, there were slight differences in body style, weren't there?
Yes, there was the tiny one, which in France was called the Légère.
Yeah.
There's an example of that here.
Okay.
And the next size up was what they called in France, they called it the Normal, and it was 4 inches wider and 10 inches longer than the smaller one.
Oh, so it weren't just chopping a bit out of the wheelbase to make the cars...
terribly complicated.
Yeah.
The wings were the same, the bonnets were the same. Well, no, the bonnets were different. Yeah, the bonnets were wider. The wings were the same, the wheels and the mechanics.
Yeah.
But the main structure of the body was that bit bigger, a bit wider, a bit longer.
Yeah.
And then there was also an even longer one, which they called the Familial,
right.
Which had 3 fold-up seats between the front seat and the back seat, so it was actually a 9-seater.
Oh, blimey.
And they did a variation of that, which was like the first hatchback. So it's like an estate car.
Yeah. And what engines power these cars?
It's a 1911 overhead valve, wet liner, engine, and
Right.
it's ostensibly the early D models had the same engine.
So for a French car of that era, it was quite a meaty engine, really.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
It only had a 3-speed gearbox, so
Right.
that was. But you know, it worked, and it's effectively the same gearbox from 1934 right up to 1957.
Yeah, they're still fantastic looking cars, though. I mean, the suicide doors, for example,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
some of these features on them.
Well, the beauty of them, the original design was by Bertone, an Italian sculptor. So there's no excuse for it not
No.
looking beautiful.
Yeah. Well, no, they are the fantastic cars, and I know a few years ago when I looked at the values of these cars, they were still quite affordable, really.
Yeah, well, they still are probably.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean most of the cars on the stand here, apart from the faux cabriolet, they're probably worth between 12 and 18,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Which isn't massive for a classic car these days.
Plenty of
It's a
other cars.
usable car.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for
Okay.
having a look around with us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers.
This brings us to the Citroen and Lightweight Specials Club. Some really interesting cars on here. Behind me we've got a Citroen Manx, a UK kit car. Interestingly, there seems to be a few kits that were UK designed, based on 2CVs. But yeah, this is the Manx from the early 1990s. This particular one is believed to have possibly been a press car. Mechanically, it's a Citroen 2CV underneath, no change there, but we've got a body that is lighter than a 2CV, and it's also considerably more aerodynamic than a 2CV as well. It's capable of reaching 80 miles per hour on that 2CV derived engine. Of course, I mentioned that 2CVs form the basis of a few British design kit cars, probably most notably the Lomax. The best known of which will probably be the 223 and 224 derivatives, meaning 2 cylinders, 2 seats, and either 3 or 4 wheels respectively. But it wasn't just Lomax that were building cars like this, there was also other models such as the Pendleton. So I've made my way over to the Citroen Car Club, a group that I've filmed with before. I did their Northern Rally earlier this year, which I'll leave a link to later on. And I've also filmed a review on one of the cars on the stand today, which I'll be showing you a bit later in this video. But first of all, I'm just going to have a quick chat with George. Now, George has got one of the sort of iconic Citroens, the DS model. Famous actually for Charles de Gaulle escaped a potential assassination in one with flat tyres, which one of the few useless bits of information I know about these cars. So now someone who does know about these cars though is George. So George, tell us a little bit about this car and, and the experience of owning it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had this vehicle for about 10 years now, and it's a 1971 DS21, so it's got the 2.1 litre engine. It's also got fuel injection. Fuel injection was introduced by Citroen in 1969, and this vehicle has it. It's a D-Jetronic system, and it works really well. It adds to the complexity of the vehicle. So it's got fuel injection. Obviously, it's got the hydraulics, which, like all the Citroen DS's from 1955, it handles the braking, the steering, the suspension, and on my one, it's also the gear change, because it's a semi-automatic as well. So I've picked probably the most complex one, but it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and the key to all this wizardry is those spheres tucked away under the bonnet.
Absolutely. So you've got 4 spheres, you've got an accumulator, and you've got a brake. So the 4 just do the suspension, and you've got the other 2 as well as part of the system.
I know a lot of these hydropneumatic Citroens frighten a lot of potential buyers. I suppose certainly with some of the more modern cars like the XM, where you've got electronics as well, you really do need a specialist. But some of these earlier cars, really, I suppose it's more about your plumbing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually a very reliable system. It's one that's been tried and tested, and as long as you ensure that you get your vehicle serviced regularly, they don't really give you any problems. Engine wise, you're looking at an engine that's been developed from the traction of that, so it's a very sort of basic 4-cylinder engine. There's nothing complex about it. The hydraulics, it always had this reputation of being a plumber's nightmare, which was completely false.
Yeah.
It's a very, very reliable hydraulic system.
The other thing is there are plenty of specialists out there now, aren't they? And as I said, because of the age the cars are at, the foibles in there have been worked out anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can actually buy anything for these vehicles. The parts are pretty reproduced for everything, from the sort of bolts to the grommets to pretty much anything. The head indicator lamp, they're all sort of reproduced now, so parts supply is not an issue.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's great. Thanks very much for having a chat about the car.
Fantastic.
Right, so I've managed to track down my friend Ben on the stand here. Ben obviously knows quite a bit more about Citroens than what I do. So he's going to give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and obviously we can have a brief talk about the club as well. I say I've filmed events previously with the Citroen Car Club. It's a great members club. You get a fantastic magazine, the Citroenian, which I successfully managed to get a Renault Megane into.
Got a photo of your Megane in our magazine, yes?
Yep, which I'm quite impressed with. I will be leaving some links in the video description to the Citroen Car Club, so you can check that out at your leisure. In the meantime, we're going to have a look at a few of the vehicles on the stand. We've got a Citroen H-Van because you've got to. If you've got a Citroen stand, you've got
iconic.
to have iconic, like all the other Citroens here. But more remarkably, we found one that is not a coffee van.
No, it's been painted to look like a coffee van. It's a 1961 H-van. The reason that most H-vans have been turned into coffee vans is they're front-wheel drive, so don't have a prop shaft travelling through the back, which means they have a very low floor and a very high ceiling. Plenty of space to stand inside and serve coffee.
Yeah.
Of course, they got the iconic corrugations. Citroen put corrugations across the van in order to strengthen the steel and give more rigidity to otherwise thin steel.
Yeah. I mean, it was very much a post-war Europe. Trying to get Europe mobile again. Obviously, there were plenty of utilitarian French cars for transporting the masses, but we also needed to transport goods as well, and this is where the H-van came into its own.
The H-van was available in a number of heights and a number of lengths. I don't know how many engines, but we're all a bit slow by today's standards, and a lot of them have been looked after, converted, and still exist today.
Yeah.
You see more H-vans on the street in England than you do in France now.
Right. So that's where they all went.
Yes, we've all been moved over here to become coffee vans and sandwich vans.
And to be honest, I suppose, I don't know, maybe it's more graceful being a coffee van than somebody's allotment shed, which...
yes, it's better than keeping chickens in it.
Yeah, definitely. Right, but there are plenty of other vehicles on the stand, so we'll go and take a look at a few of those. What do you get if you mix an Italian car with a Citroen? Well, Citroen once owned Maserati, and the result of that was the ultimate in French decadence, I think. Jeremy, we've got behind us a Citroen SM. Quite an interesting car, aren't they, these?
It is. When Citroen decided to develop the SM as a sports touring car, they were thinking of what engine they could put in it. In 1968, they bought Maserati and they reworked a 4-litre V8 Monza engine to make a 3-litre V6 engine, which they put in the SM. The engine's mounted at the back for better weight distribution over the front wheels, so the gearbox is in front because it's a front wheel drive car. You've got a lay shaft or auxiliary shaft that runs the air conditioning pump, the hydraulic pump and the alternator. The hydraulic pump also does the brakes, the suspension and the steering, and it's got an actuation valve which allows all of this to happen. It's got a sphere on each corner suspension unit, and then it's got a height correcting sphere at the back in the middle underneath.
Right. And would that engine have been the same engine as in the Maserati Merak?
The original one was, because it was a 3-litre V6, but because of the oil crisis in the early 70s, the taxation on a 3-litre car was a lot more, so Citroen decided to take the CC down to 2.7. So the car that we're buying now is a 2.7 litre engine.
It's probably partly the reason why the DSs often have relatively small engines, because of that taxation.
That might well be. Obviously, with the CX, that superseded the DS. What they've done is they've actually gone up to 2.5 litres,
Right.
as opposed to 2.3, which was the size of the DS.
Yeah.
The original engine on the SM was thought to be something like a DS23 engine,
Okay.
but because of them purchasing Maserati, they reworked the engine to make it fit.
Of course, that V6 engine's only part of the attraction to these cars. Obviously, it's a very slippery aerodynamic shape, isn't it, on these SMs?
It's thought that because Peugeot used the Pininfarina method of body styling, and it's thought that Peugeot might have had some kind of input into how the SM turned out, because the SM itself is a Grand Tourer.
Right. Right. Yeah, it is. It's very much the French GT, isn't it? And a very unique one at that. Well, that's smashing. Thank you very much.
That's great.
Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. My camera decided it had had enough for one day, meaning I didn't get to some of the other stands, such as Peugeot Sport Club UK or 2CV GB, which was the stand with the big duck in the middle. I also didn't get much chance to have a look at this Citroen Ami, which was 2CV derived, but don't take my word for it.
This is a Citroen Ami. The standard Ami was based on a 2CV, had the same engine, the same chassis, the same suspension and the same body roll in corners.
I'm sure Ben would have also told you that the Ami Super in fact had an engine from the GS, the 1015cc flat 4. It also got the floor mounted gear change and the front brakes from the GS. Another car we didn't have a chance to look at on the day was this Saxo VTR, but fear not, because I've actually featured this car already, quite recently in fact. You may wish to watch that video next where I review the Saxo VTR, though this does sadly bring to a close our coverage from the 2023 Classic Motor Show and also the 2023 car show season. I do still have some more videos to come for you in the very, very near future. I'd like to, at this point, take the opportunity to thank all those who have subscribed to the channel over the last few years, and quite recently we've actually surpassed 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't already done so, why not join those 1,000 people and subscribe to the channel yourself? Also be sure to hit that bell notification so that you will be alerted when the next video goes live, in which I will be out doing a car review with a topless German. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.